Hi, I'm Sarah,
And I'm Edgar.
and today we're going to be talking about Ruby, the programming language.
As an introduction, we're going to cover the topics of the history, basic and major features, show a programming demo, and then have our personal reflection upon the language.
The history of Ruby is important to understand because this shows the reason why it was created and what it was originally designed for. Understanding its background can explain why it is still being used today and can also allow predictions in its future. Ruby was created in Japan in 1995 by
A man called Yukiro Matsumoto.
But he also just goes by Mats. Since he could not find a language that best suited him, Mats started developing Ruby on February 23, 1993, to show that programming was fun for beginner programmers.
Fun fact, the two names that were proposed were Coral and Ruby. Mats decided to name it Ruby because of one of his colleagues' birthstones, which was Ruby. Mats knew both Perl and Python programming languages, but thought Perl was too much of a toy language and Python was not a true object-oriented language at the time. 3 years after it was released, Mats created an English homepage of Ruby and a mailing list called Ruby Talk. On the Ruby website, this is where you can sign up for the different mailing lists. We have Ruby Talk, Ruby Core, Ruby Docs, and Ruby CVS, which all deal with different parts of Ruby. Underneath over here, this is where you can subscribe to whichever one you want by simply putting your email address and submitting the form.
These mailing lists allow the community to have open discussion about Ruby.
The combination of the English homepage, the mailing list, Ruby Talks, and even the introductory book Programming Ruby, published in 2001, allowed the language to expand much further than simply Japan by allowing more people to understand and learn Ruby.
But the major turning point was the creation of Ruby Gems and Ruby on Rails, which both were released in 2004. Ruby on Rails was developed by a guy named David Hansen. The purpose of its creation was for web development, and it used a software pattern called MVC, which provided a clean and clear isolation between model, view, and controller, and it made it easier to maintain the code. In 2006, Ruby started gaining its popularity, and major companies such as Twitter began implementing it in its development.
However, after 5 years, the founders switched from Ruby to Java Server. Although it is starting to lose its competitive edge in web development, Ruby is still used for its benefits towards younger programmers. A paradigm is a way that a programming language is classified. Ruby is classified as a strong multi-paradigm language. Multi-paradigm language just means that it falls under classification of multiple paradigms. Ruby is procedural by the fact that it uses functions and can create procedures to avoid redundancy. It is also an object-oriented programming language by the ability to create classes and objects. The use of objects allows programmers to create a template for data that cannot be contained as a single variable. Ruby is also a generic programming language by its dynamic flexibility.
Ruby's data types include numbers, booleans, strings, arrays, hashes, and symbols. Ruby's numbers were classified as fixed num and big num depending on the size of the number, but in the latest update, fixed num and big num are now considered an int. A cool thing in Ruby is that arrays can hold different data types. For example, an array can hold an int, string, and a floating point.
For instance, whenever you create an array, you start using the name of the array, such as array or array1. Then you have to initialize it to something. Inside the array, you're going to put the elements. If they're all integers, then you type them and separate them by commas. However, in Ruby, since you're able to put in different types of elements, you can put an integer, a string, and then a float.
With the flow control that Ruby and many other languages use, we are able to run certain procedures if and only if they are needed. One way that Ruby controls the flow of a program is using if statements.
For example, in this program, we have our variable called grade, which is assigned a value of 40. In the following if conditions, we check to see if the grade is an A, B, C, or D, or even an F. As you can see, it fails all these conditions, and then that way, whenever it reaches the else, it's forced to output F. We can run it by checking right here, and the grade, it ends up being an F. Okay, the benefit of writing subprograms is that in our original case, without subprograms, we have to initialize and declare the variables. Right here we have our 10 different variables of Fahrenheit temperatures, and then to output each of them in degrees Kelvin, we'd have to, for each individual, we'd have to multiply it by 5 divided by 9, and then, obviously before, have subtracted 32, and then at the end, add 273.15. For each of these that we wanted to output, we'd have to do the same thing over and over again. And this is a small scale program. However, if we use the procedures, we could define a simple function right here that's called Kelvin, have it return the degree in Kelvin, and have it input the degree in Fahrenheit. That way, whenever we decide to run this program, all we have to do is output whatever the Kelvin function returns as soon as the Fahrenheit degree is inputted. As a demonstration right here, we have on the first half, this is run, and it's the exact same output as whenever we run it with the procedures. The only difference is that whenever you're looking at it from the coding perspective, it looks a lot cleaner and a lot more familiar whenever you just read puts Kelvin instead of puts and then all these numbers behind it.
Object orientation is a feature that allows a programmer to use objects to contain information that cannot be held within a simple variable. In object-oriented programming languages, we have classes and objects, where an object is used for a specific instance and the class is like a blueprint of that object. In this example, we created a class called car, and it will hold the name, really the model of the car, and the color, and we instantiate it by using the name Fiat and the color red. So the object in this program is my car, and in line 11 we output with the function getInfo of the name of the car, which is Fiat, and the color, which is red.
The Ruby programming language is open source, meaning that the code for Ruby is available to anyone. It's not hidden or restricted like on other languages such as Java or C#. A major advantage to a programming language being open source is that since it's free to use, anyone can contribute, and then the community helps it progress a lot faster and a lot further. Another advantage is that open source becomes used for major projects, and on any project it's capable of being modified by anyone.
Ruby can be used for a wide variety, which makes it a general purpose programming language. For example, it can be used for an object-oriented program, or it can be used in web development.
Being a general purpose language allows Ruby to be versatile and be used in many different programs. Ruby is also an interpreted language, which means it is not compiled but read line by line.
Ruby is one of the top used languages for server-side scripting for web development. Server-side scripting is when the user requests for a web page and the information is processed by the script on the server side before returning to the user. This is important because there are huge advantages to this in the web development side. Server-side scripting avoids overloading, which can cause issues such as loading web pages slowly, taking up CPU, and web freezing.
This also allows creating web pages dynamically. Dynamic means to create something on the fly. For example, if a website is for shopping, instead of having hundreds of HTML pages designed for each product, there could be one page that creates the product page when a user clicks on that specific link.
Along with server-side scripting, Ruby also uses common gateway interfaces, which allows the back and forth communication between the user and the web server. For example, CGI is used when a user fills out a form, and then that form is sent to the server and processed. Then the user receives some sort of confirmation back. This communication is through the common gateway interface. eRuby is a template system that allows Ruby to be embedded into HTML like PHP. This can be used for server-side scripting and a way to package up and process forms in HTML. Another feature of Ruby being a server-side programming language is that it can connect to databases such as MySQL or Oracle so that programs run on Ruby can be lightweight to the user and can communicate with the server on developer side so that bigger programs do not use the user's device's resources.
Because Ruby can also work online, this allows multiple users to access information at the same time from different locations. through help from the framework Ruby on Rails, which demonstrates its scalability.
So the code we decided to implement was a merge sort. So to start out, we created an array with numbers that aren't sorted, and then we output the initial array, so it just outputs these numbers, and then we call a function called merge sort, and it takes in these parameters. And as you can see, you don't have to have parentheses around the parameters like so, like in other languages. And then you can also see that there's no semicolons at the end of a line. So, I mean, you can, but it's not needed in Ruby. So, anyways. So after calling the merge sort function down here, we jumped up here, and this is where we create the actual function. And we start out with def, and we called it merge sort. And then these are the parameters that we're passing in. And then we have an if statement that I is less than j. Basically, all that this does is keep cutting the array in half, and then jumps down here, and this is where Edgar will go more in depth, but it basically cuts down the array until it can't be cut down anymore, and then returns the left and the right side, because a merge sort splits it left and right, technically, and then slowly compares the two sides and orders it that way, but Edgar will now go in depth about the second function that was created.
So although the merge sort seems to be kind of the same on all programming languages, what was pretty neat about this one was that in this merge sort right here, these two lines kind of stick out. So as you can see, the pound sign is normally just for commenting. However, on these lines, line 12, 13, 30, and even line 34, this is so right here we're outputting an array. So the pound sign is just to help us specify that we're not outputting the exact characters, but we're going to output this array. And what was pretty neat that I haven't really seen in other languages, well, at least I haven't used it, is these three little dots. I was kind of confused by them at first, but it turns out that this is just a range notation. It's kind of like an iterator. So this is going to be an array from I all the way till mid plus 1, excluding mid plus 1. So it'd just be from I plus 1, I plus 2, all the way till mid. If you would subtract one of these dots, just make it array I dot dot mid plus 1, then it would just be the range 1 all the way to mid plus 1, including it. But since it's got the three dots, it's that range excluding it, which was pretty neat. I haven't really dealt with that in any other language. Okay, now that we know that this merge sort works, I'm just going to run it to this temp Ruby file. Okay, and this is what it outputs: the initial array, and then after the merge sort, it's all sorted down here. Another interesting thing to observe about this program is that it doesn't really have a main. So our actual main is just at the end of it. We use our merge sort, which is already predefined over here. If we would happen to change the order, make it so that the merge sort is used before it's actually defined, then this is our temp0 Ruby file. I'll try running it, and if y'all notice, it crashed real quick. I had to take a picture in slow-mo just to see the actual error, but it shows us right here that the error is in the temporary 0 file in line 3, and it's undefined method merge sort, because on line 3 we're trying to use the merge sort, even though at this time the program doesn't know what the merge sort is supposed to do, so it gives us the no method error.
So my thoughts on Ruby are, it is really simple and easy to use. I like that it doesn't use semicolons. I think that's really beneficial for beginner programmers, and it is known for being simple and was really created for beginner programmers. And it's really similar to Python, which is also known for the simplicity for
beginner programmers. I'd like to learn more about it and be able to, to code with it comfortably, but I think I would use C++ and Java over it. I would definitely be more interested in seeing it in the web development side because I do know JavaScript and PHP. So I'd like to be able to compare Ruby on Rails to those two and see how it is, especially since major companies like Twitter used it and they did end up transferring. So I want to see why and just have my own thoughts on that.
As a reflection of Ruby as a programming language, I think it's a good language. It's really great for people who are starting, so they can kind of understand what code is and so that they don't get overwhelmed by it. However, personally, I'm more of a fan of Java. Java was my first programming language, and it is more difficult, but I also like that it's more, you get more of a feel of computer science than you do in Python and in Ruby. For example, here's the merge sort in Java. Let's see. So side by side, we see that Ruby is a lot shorter. Right here, we can do it in just 35 lines, and then on this sample code, we see that it has 70-something lines. Although this is more drawn out, you have to import libraries and everything. You have to have a main. I like Java because it's very, it gets you thinking. It gets you in the mentality of computer science. So you have to think more of, okay, so this print method, okay, it's part of out, part of system, and however the pros that I would see in Ruby is that I like the iterators such as the ... how it helps you with shorthand. You don't need the semicolon, but in a way that's also helpful for Java because it helps you take a big problem and break it down easily. So yes, Ruby is better for reading it because you can see it more like in English. However, I believe Java prepares you more for the mentality of, okay, I have to break this down. I have to do it step by step. It helps you kind of think about it in a computer sense, not in an English sense of, okay, what am I going to do now? And so that's why I think Ruby is good, but my personal preference, I would stick with Java. The other thing that I liked about Ruby that I don't see in Java is that they use end. So at first, whenever I started programming with Ruby, it seemed a little annoying how to do a simple if statement, to just do any sort of function. You needed to add end. But then, especially as you can see on Notepad++, it helps you kind of break down. It helps you section it off so that you don't have to worry as much of having too much inside or not enough inside of the if statements and worrying about, oh, did I indent it right? Did I put it in the right spot? So on this side, I like how the end works, which on Java, the downside of it is that since you don't have end, you really have to pay more attention to the braces.